is that we discovered a civilization which was contributed to Mesopotamians and the Egyptians. And secondly, before the discovery of the Harappan civilization, it was always thought by most of the scholars that there is a gap in fact in the history of South Asia. Scholars like Vincent Smith, when they wrote about the Indian history, they say that India jumps from Stone Age to the Stupa period or the Buddhist period. And there is a big gap in fact, there is a big Vedic night in the history. So at one stroke, because of the discovery of the Harappan culture, the antiquity of settled life, they were stretched back by almost 3,000 years. And now India boasts of a continuous history for last 2 million years. The earliest stone tools that are discovered here that are dated to 20 lakhs, 2 million, and from 20 lakhs to till present, we have the continuity. We always compare the Harappans with the Mesopotamians and Egyptians, but natural because they had very strong interaction, contact, trade contact. So what is the difference between these? Now you will always remember the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians because they created this monumental architecture. You were given a choice. Even I will say that I want to visit not Harappan side but maybe Egyptian side because I can see pyramid. Now Harappans have not done that. They have not really created these type of monuments. But that does not mean that Harappans were not capable. They were 100% capable. They were considered to be the best civil engineers in the contemporary world. And if they had decided, they could have created much better monuments than the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians. But their philosophy was different. There are two reasons for that. Of course, the thinking was different. They always thought that creating these type of monuments is of no use to the common people. They always consider, the center was, of course, common people. And they also never believed in fact in burying a lot of wealth under the ground along with the dead bodies, because that will also go forever and that will not be able to, to be used for any purpose. Because of that, they have not done that. That philosophy was different. They were more practical people. And the system was different, in fact. Clearly, in Mesopotamia and Egypt, we find, monarchical system ruled by the kings. And, most of the activities happen around the kings only. Because of that, this type of, monumental architecture were created. But in Harappan times, in the Harappan region, they had got more democratic setup. Some kind of panchayat system was introduced by the Harappans. In fact, recently the ICH has published one book on India, the mother of democracy. And we have traced, in fact, the roots of democracy, in fact, back to the Harappan times. So that is a very, very important contribution. So they had different system. And the system allowed, in fact, developments for the common people. And that is, because of that, Harappans have used a lot of wealth, which they created. They literally plundered the West, in fact. They got a lot of wealth from them through trade. And that wealth was used by the Harappans for creating those beautiful, very well-planned and hygienic cities. So that is the difference, in fact, the difference between the Harappan thinking and the system, in fact, they had. So that is, because of that, we can see that, there are a lot of elements, in fact, which were introduced by the Harappans, which have continued till today. The knowledge system, I always call that the Indian knowledge system was introduced by the Harappans. And there is a continuity for the, in that for last 5,000 years. And the knowledge system that they created was so relevant. Even today, we have not forgotten that. And there are a lot of communities today who are using the, this traditional knowledge system even today. They are subsisting on that. So that is the relevance, in fact, of the knowledge system. And therefore, I always call that Harappans, we are the founders of the Indian culture. Now, what we have discovered at Rakhigarhi and other sites, we have discovered the maybe roots of the Indian culture that is found at Rakhigarhi and other places. But that is the roots, in fact, the beginning of the Indian culture starts, in fact, in the Saraswati region. And that is, the importance of the Harappan culture.
Wonderful. So you definitely, foiled my attempt to make it very, very boring and did, sprinkle it with good information. My, follow-up question to you would be, talked about 2 million years history. So going by that, when do we really say that this is the Indian culture? Because that is when we find the signs of oldest signs of culture in India. Is that the case?
No, not only that. In fact, we of course we have the earliest dates for the beginning of this particular culture. Also, there is a long precedence for that also. There is a site called Mehergarh, which is in Pakistan. So that site has the earliest evidence of settled life going back to 7000 BCE. So from settled life, there's a gradual, maybe transition happening, and that ultimately maybe transform into the formation of the Harappan culture. The basic technology that was introduced by the Harappans, that is so important that we have not really forgotten, as I mentioned, that we are using the same technology. In Khambat region, there are a lot of families who are making stone beads. And they are doing roaring business. They are making the replicas of the Harappan beads by using the same Harappan technology. So there is a continuity in that. There are a lot of potters here who are still using the same 5,000 old technology for making pottery. Same kind of method is followed for processing clay, for firing technique, etc. And particularly when I am in Haryana, when I am in Rakhigarhi, I used to go around the village when we are excavating. And when I used to move in the village, I used to get impression that I am moving the Harappan village. Because the dimension of the road, present road in the village, exactly same as the Harappan, roads. The, typical house plan, people have changed now, of course, but typical traditional house plan is exactly the copy of the Harappan house plan. There's a lot, there's a middle open courtyard in the middle and rooms on all sides. So there is so much continuity. They are still making the same kind of pottery. Same, painted pottery is being produced by the modern people. And if you keep one modern pot and one Harappan pot side by side, you will not be able to recognize, in fact, which one is there. And some of the delicacies like chicken tandoor, for example, that is the contribution given by the Harappans. Then hair science was developed by the Harappans. There is a site called Kunal, where you find the traces of the medicinal herbal plants. So we believe that perhaps they maybe developed that. We have the actual representation of the different terracotta figurines in yogic posture. The yoga tradition was introduced by the Harappans. The meditation was introduced by the Harappans. Again, the difference between the Harappans and the Mesopotamians is that Harappans mostly follow the non-violence pattern. Whereas, we do see a lot of violence in fact in Mesopotamia and in Egypt, because they had a standing army and they used to raid the surrounding regions frequently, and they used to get a lot of wealth. And the people who were subjugated, they were used as slaves by the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians for creating those pyramids and the ziggurats in fact there. But here we do not find that evidence in fact. And that tradition that I was talking, that has continued till today, and therefore I believe that most of the 99% traditions that we follow today, they are the typical Harappan traditions, maybe with some little modification, but we have still continued that. So there is so much relevance. The basic science and technology that was developed by the Harappans, that has continued today, and it will continue in fact in South Asia, definitely. So because of that, we find that there is so much connection with our ancient, maybe Harappan culture.
I will, come back to you. I do want to talk to you about the ancient DNA extraction that your team led by you did, and what were the findings thereof. But before that, I want to, rope in Tana and talk about her work. One reason for doing this session, and as we realized while talking together the other days, there's no interaction happening between, research happens in one field and it's happening in the other field, but there's no interaction. Right. So, why don't you talk about your work and how Patni Archives happened, and
sure,
what are we doing?
Sure. There? In fact, this is a conversation we were having over lunch as well. About the need for history. This is working, right? This works, right? Yeah. For the need for history, archaeology, to come together and really have a dialogue, because I think that is really needed. So yes, coming back to how how we started the Patni archives. So just to give you all a very quick idea about the archives. If you're familiar with the history of Gujarat, we had about 200 odd princely states in Gujarat. This is pre-independent India. And one of the princely states was Bhavnagar. Now, in the princely state, you would have a divan to the king, right? And in Bhavnagar, we had Sir Prabhashankar Patni, who was a divan to the king. And he played a very significant role early 20th century. Bhavnagar was one of the very progressive princely states of those times. And
I would like to interrupt you, and I had this question in mind for a long time. Some of the people say that 1920s is around the time when they said it's a time of enlightenment and enlightenment for princely state. Is that true, and why? I mean, what was happening at that point of time?
Right. So if you just most of us are familiar with world history also. So you have the end of the First World War, early 20th century. We are under the colonial rule, and again, the history tells us that our Maharajas contributed in a very large way towards the war effort, because we were also under their rule. So we contributed in terms of soldiers, in terms of logistics, and in several ways. And there was an idea that once the war ended, we would have a charter for our independence. Clearly, that did not happen, right? However, we already knew that we were going to get independence in the near future. So when we look at 1920s and 30s, we have a lot of these princely states who are, these progressive princely states who are actually encouraging, students who are giving state scholarships for them to go abroad and study and equip themselves in a way that they can come back and contribute to state building and nation building in that way. Right, so in case of Bhavnagar, there were state-sponsored scholarships to MIT, to study in MIT, and then the students would come back, and then they would be like, looking at policy and so on and so forth. So this is what we mean by, this change that was happening really in the early 20th century. Of course, we have the International Congress also talking about independence. You have Gandhi, you have Sardar, you have all that. That also happening together. So we are looking at moving towards freedom, but we also know that we have to equip ourselves for the freedom that's going to happen. And in that sense, these progressive princely states played a significant role, which I think we've not really looked at in a lot of detail. So I'm hoping that answers your question. But yes, so this is what got me interested to with the Patni archives. And
so tell us about something. That really is something really interesting that you found in the archives after they were discovered. Something that really stood out to you. Yeah,
the very fact that I'm interested in history and anything old got me looking at the papers. So something like started off as a conversation about translating something from Gujarati to English. Ensured that we landed up in Bhavnagar and we went to the Juno bungalow, and it was such a moment of discovery. When you open these, and I'm sure a lot of us here have those old cupboards where we have really old things, and we have these things bundled up and kept away for generations together. So we are now in the 5th generation of the Patni family, and we went and we opened those cupboards, and we have these typically, I think there are pictures also where we have those bundled up papers and all. And that is when that is what got me very interested, because the moment we opened it, it's like opening a mystery box, really. You don't know what's going to pop up, Like when you excavate, I'm sure you have some idea about what's going to come up, but in my case, we knew that there were the papers of the Diwan and they're going to be state papers, but we also knew that he was close to Gandhiji, that that Sir Patni played an important role in the state politics. So I had that idea, but also to actually witness these papers, to see them, to actually hold them. So yes, this is exactly how we found the bundles. And this to me is very exciting. I mean, this might look like a pile of pasti for a lot of people, but to me, I find it very exciting, and that is really what got me started. And we started our work really in 2018, 19. And over time, it's really become it's turned into this very interesting project where our focus has also been to involve a lot of young people into this, which I think is extremely important, be it archaeology or history, right? That how do we get the younger generation to look at history, to engage with the archives, how do we train them? So there are several questions that have emerged out of these bundles for me, personally. And for me, that just keeps me kind of going and very interested in the archives.
Can I add something in this?
Please go ahead.
I think we have a lot of students here, maybe history students. Now let me tell you that there are two important sources. Of course, Tana's source that she has spoken about, literary or the textual source, is very, very important. But we have limitation because the written sources do not go beyond maybe 4th century BCE. And if you want to reconstruct, we have the major portion of the history which has no written records from 20 lakhs to almost 4th century BCE. So that part of the history has to be written based on archaeology. But also, we are doing a lot of, what we call is the historical archaeology, where we are trying to synthesize the textual sources as well as the archaeological sources. And the history that is emerging is completely, we can say that a real history is emerging. For example, I'll just give an example. We always read about the Gupta age, which is considered to be the golden age in ancient Indian history. And that history is written basically on the basis of written records. We have a lot of, Prayak Prasasti, coins, etc. And for the first time in 1980s, one Professor R.S. Sharma from Delhi University, he tried to synthesize the archaeological sources and the literary sources. So intentionally he covered, he studied two periods, the Kushan period and the Gupta period. And then he started going through, the archaeological sources. And he found that, there are a large number of Kushan sites. We have a number of, maybe what we call as archaeological sites. So large number of them are found in, in Ganga Basin. Compared to that, there are few Kushan sites. So immediately, he started, asking question, is this a sign of a golden age? And it is not a sign of golden age. If it is a golden age, that should also reflect in the number of sites, which is not there. Then, he also found, that some sites are excavated. And what he noticed that the Kushan period people, they created proper, building material. They have their own, maybe, brick size and all these. Gupta people did not do that. Their large structures are large and spacious in Kushan period. The structures found in the Gupta period are very small and, very, maybe rickety structures. So on the basis of that, he started questioning. So the need of the hour, why the history is becoming bored, because the history that I taught to my students are taking, teaching the same history to their students, and there is no change. So if you want to bring change, if you want to make it more, maybe, interesting, maybe these type of methodologies are very important. And maybe combining the, different sources.
That's true. I believe you're very right in saying that, because this intersection will also allow cross-verification of the information.
Yes.
What we find from one source and we can verify it from another, that would really allow us to paint a real full picture that we can be sure of. I would also, go from old to ancient again, bring in Disha. Disha, I saw a tweet some days back from you, talking about why we are, digging at Rakhigarhi for the ninth time. And it has some explanation. So why don't you share that part?
So I was writing for the print, and when they asked me to write on Rakhigarhi, I was just, for 1 week, I was thinking about what should I write. Because, we have Professor Shinde, who has worked at Rakhigarhi previously. Dr. Amrindranath from Archaeological Survey of India has also excavated Rakhigarhi. And right now, we, like ASI and myself included in the project, we are excavating Rakhigarhi again. So I was thinking about it constantly, and I got a chance to ask this question with my teammates and, the seniors who were at site. Why are we excavating Rakhigarhi the 9th time? Because, see, we have field seasons in excavation, and for those who don't know, we don't excavate all year round. We have a lot of limitations, such as, temperature. During summers, it's just unbearable to excavate, or during monsoons, we just can't excavate because we're excavating in the open, right? We have no buildings, no shades, nothing. So we excavate for a few months in a year, and then we compile the data. And we know that the previous excavations, which of course includes Professor Shinde's excavation, has given us immense data, very important data, which is, very, very important to write the story of the site. So why are we excavating Rakhigarhi again? And when I asked this question, I went back to the sites of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Dholavira, Mehergarh included, which Professor Shinde has mentioned, which is in Balochistan, now Pakistan. And I thought, you know what, few seasons might not be enough, because look at the sheer size of the site. It's a very, very large site. It's one of the largest Harappan cities, in the entire civilization, probably the largest, if I'm not wrong. So to few seasons or 8 seasons of excavation, which includes a lot of scientific, analysis, might only scratch the surface. And every excavation, I just want to point out, we just don't dig out of the blue for antiquities. We dig because we have few nagging research questions which we need to solve in the field. So every field season will have its own objectives, and accordingly we'll have a methodology. So for instance, this season we are trying to understand the land use pattern. Try to see how the different mounds, and mounds are basically the archaeological sites which sort of get buried and they become like small peaks. So how these different mounds at Rakhigarhi are connected to each other, and to basically look at the gray area. So every excavation will add on to the existing data, and hopefully we'll have enough data to create the whole picture of a really big site.
Here is a question that's common to all three of you. So when you approach either a dig site or an archive, the information that you find out, it's not possible, or at least not generally humanly possible, to keep your own biases out of your approach, your methodology, and all of that. So you dig out things from ground, then comes the point of interpreting them. And same from archives. You come upon something so vast, then you have to pick and choose. And then you are finally the people in charge of telling that story, or helping build the foundation of story to be told. So how do you sort of then, guard against this, your own biases, or the pressure also from the society, from the political dispensations of different times? How do you guard against that? How do you ensure that the story gets told as it is? Tana, would you like to start?
This is a difficult question, but one sure way of ensuring that we are really presenting that is unbiased and neutral is to ensure that we are getting our facts right. So, say for instance, there is something that has emerged from the archives, right? And maybe there is some factual information that has emerged. Now, we live in times where we have access to a lot of information. So one thing that is most obvious is to also cross-verify the facts with other sources to ensure that whatever that you are presenting is verified. But here, let me also just tell you a very interesting story about verification, So when I was going through one of the journals, which is a part of this 6,000 book collection from the Patni library, there is a journal which was published. It is Deshi Rajya. It was published between 1927 to 41. In one of the issues, there was a story of a horse trader. Now the story dates back to the 19th century, so early 1800s. So it is an archive within an archive, right? And it was a story of a horse trader from Kutch who was really one of the first agents, English, not English, he was Kutchi, Gujarati Kutchi, but he was the first agent for the Britishers to actually buy horses from Afghanistan and then send them to Mysore, to the Britishers to fight against Tipu Sultan. Right? Now there's an entire story. And this story appears in parts in that journal, which is also now a part of the archive. Now what happened was, when I went to UK last year, I was going through the archives in London, in the British Library archives. So the name of the trader is Sheth Sundarji Saudagar, right? That's his name. And when I go to the archives and I open one account of a British officer of the similar, who was in a similar area, I get the same story, in the sense from his perspective. And it is not a story. He is actually giving me an account of how Sheth Sundarji Saudagar is struggling to give us horses because of some drought and so on and so forth. So somewhere for me it is very exciting, because I'm already able to verify the fact that our story, there was one story here of Sundarji Saudagar. Yes. Now it's verified that there was a trader and he used to supply horses. Right? And he was a fairly... So in that sense, it requires a lot of work, but it is very important that we do verify, that we cross-check, what also emerges. So, yeah.
So
Sorry.
I probably mentioned this to you before. Reminds me of Rudyard Kipling's book called Kim, yeah. Right? The role of the horse merchant in that.
Yes, absolutely.
Disha, how do you...
It's it's very easy to bring in your own perspectives when we're undertaking any sort of research, especially the preset narratives that we are taught in maybe graduation or wherever in colleges. It's very easy. But archaeology is one discipline where these narratives won't work, because you start excavating and you don't know what's there, right? You might find a brick wall, or you might find a hearth. You might find something else completely entirely, right? But what building narrative, what happens is you take the data while you're excavating, it's more or less technical. Because you're using your methodologies, the field methodologies and technical aspects while excavating a site, because you have to dig and you have to record in certain way. When your perspective comes into play is post-excavation, I think. Many a times archaeologists do make a mistake in pushing their own thinking and try to, you can't mold archaeological data. I just want to tell you this for those who think that you can easily mold, because it's physical evidence and it doesn't leave a lot of room to play around with the physical evidence. If I show you a figurine of a dog, it is a dog. You will see it, only then you will know it's a dog. Otherwise, you will just write a fragment of animal figurine. You will not give it a name, So it doesn't leave a lot of room, but it does happen, but it happens at a later stage. But one have to keep in mind that, we have to keep facts where they are and try to look at objects and findings in a more contextual manner. Yeah.
So I would like to, modify my question for you and come directly to the part that you played in the team that extracted the ancient DNA. So I have twofold questions there. A, what were the findings? And are we, based on the findings, then, trying to build a certain picture? Can we be faltering in that based on, given the fact that, thousands, if not millions of people live there? We find very few burial sites, very few remains, and out of those also we have extracted DNA from one skeleton only. Yes. Please go ahead.
I think, I've been working on this issue for last 16 years. I started in 2006. See, when these results were published, one comment came that this is a politically oriented research, because the BJP government is there. To please the BJP government, we have published this data. But let me tell you that, suppose we had succeeded in getting DNA in 2006, we could have published in 2009-10, and the results would have been same. As Disha has mentioned, that you cannot, play with the data. In fact, the data is, is the hardcore evidence that we have. And the entire data is in public domain. Anybody can, check that. So, a lot of, in our history, in fact, there is, myth that the Aryans came from outside. How that myth has emerged, there's a long history. I can talk on that also for half an hour, but I don't want to talk. But those who are
explain the findings.
Yeah. So basically this was the issue that we wanted to. There are some gray areas in Indian history, early Indian history, and this was one impact. Because as far as the Harappan people are concerned, there are two opinions. Some say that they were the indigenous people, and some say that they came from outside. But there was no way to know, in fact, who are the actual people. And if you want to know about the people, simply by looking at the anatomy, you cannot make out who are the people. So you have to get DNA from them. And that was challenging for us because the condition in Indian subcontinent is so adverse for the preservation of any organic matter. The soil is bad, in fact, it's more acidic, and it is completely adverse to the for the preservation. And the climate also is more humid, which is not really good for the preservation. So we started in fact. I started in fact this particular exercise at a site called Farmana, which I excavated before Rakhigarhi. And there I can admit that one of the objectives of our research was to understand the people. Who are the people? And there we miserably failed. I am accepting this in front of everyone because we were not prepared for the DNA research that time. We had no idea what precautions we need to take, how we had to go about for the excavation and all this. So we excavated nearly 70 burials, and at the end, after 2 months, we started extracting, and whatever was DNA was there, that was lost. So we did not find, we did not succeed. Then we started developing contact with international communities, international scientists, and the Seoul National University in Korea has one of the finest forensic science department. So they suggested that follow this particular protocol for the excavation and collection of data. So we started using this PPE kit. Then we targeted one burial at a time. We excavated that, documented that, and immediately the samples were packed and sent to the laboratory. So because of this method, because the modern DNA is so sensitive, if you don't use this precaution, the modern DNA can get into ancient DNA easily. And in spite of this, in spite of taking all the precaution, like that PPE kit, the doctors used to use during Corona time, exactly same PPE kit were used by us. In spite of that, when we analyzing the data, the DNA data, we found some traces of East Asian people in that. And there was no way, in fact, because the Harappans had never contact with that region. We never expected any contact, with that region. So how that particular DNA has come, East Asian. And then we realized that one of our students was from Korea, who was excavating. So in spite of all this precaution, his DNA got into ancient DNA. So, how sensitive this data is. So that is one thing. Because of that, we have not really found DNA in all the skeletal remains that we have excavated at Rakhigarhi. Nearly 60 burials were excavated. Sure. But the DNA that we have found in one skeletal remain, that also has tremendous implication. Those who understand the population genomics, DNA studies like testing rice, whether it is cooked or not, we pick up only one grain. So DNA is like that. Even if you have maybe 100 DNA samples, the results is going to be the same. So there is no maybe substance in this particular criticism that we have very small data. But of course we need more data because we want to understand the composition of population at Rakhigarhi also, because it's a huge site, and there may be different groups also present that time. So we need more data. We need more data from outside Rakhigarhi also. We can compare from Rajasthan, from Gujarat, even from Pakistan, and then try to develop this particular. But this small data is not really impeding our work at all. So this is a very, very important. And let me tell you that when this particular research was published, exactly on 6th of September 2019, and in 2019 in November, there was a big international conference on genomics in China. And they had identified 9 breakthrough researches in the world, and the Rakhigarhi research was on top of that. So that means, this particular research is identified, accepted by the entire scientific community. And the journal in which we have published, Shale, now that journal is the topmost journal. In fact, there are maybe 10,000 scientific journals, and this is on top. Shale, Science, and Nature, they have the same impact factor, 40 impact factor. So it is most reliable data that we have, and we have carried out a lot of this comparative study also. What we have done, in fact, do you want me to explain that? Or?
So in the morning, Peggy ji talked about migration of people. So if you could, briefly explain what did the DNA data showed us?
See, I think what we have done here now, we have not really relied only on the genetic source, the DNA source. But here we have also used archaeological source here for understanding the gradual growth of the culture and the people. Also, one new research that we did, in fact, that is called craniofacial reconstruction. For the first time, we have shown, in fact, how exactly Harappan people looked like. 3D reconstruction of the facial features. That was done, in fact, in collaboration with the Korean scientists. So we have these 3 sets of data. So in the archaeological data, it is quite clear that that right from the beginning of settled life, there is a indigenous development of most of the basic science and technology, and the technology that was developed was gradually growing. That we have is very strong, and it was perfected, in fact, during the mature Harappan period or the Harappan civilization phase. So we have very strong evidence of that. So in the archaeological data, there is a continuity from beginning of the Harappan culture till the end of the Harappan culture. Then when we started analyzing the data from Rakhigarhi, we have also used the genetic chronology also to find out what are the roots of these. And the roots are going back to 12,000 years, 10,000 BCE. It so happened, in fact, around 10,000 BCE, hunter-gatherers, because people were in hunting stage that time. So somewhere on the border of Iran and Afghanistan, the hunter-gatherers, they split into 2 groups. One group came to South Asia and one went to Iran. The group which came to South Asia, their genes started getting mutated, and they developed a very distinct South Asian genes here. And those genes, in fact, which were developed maybe around 12,000 years ago, the same genes continued into the Harappan people, and the same genes have continued to modern people also. Because we have carried out a lot of samples, modern people samples. Nearly 3,500 modern samples were analyzed. And we have included people from different religious group, linguistic group in that. 140 different groups present in South Asia. They were covered, in fact, in the study. And what the final outcome is that this is an indication, of course, we're getting that most of the people in South Asia, right from Andaman, Nicobar to Ladakh and Kashmir, and from Bengal to Afghanistan, they carry the Harappan genes. And there is a lot of mixing happening right from the early stage. For example, right from the beginning of the Harappan, beginning of the settled life, at Mehergarh, we are finding some material which is not local. It is coming, some material is coming from Karachi coast, which is roughly 1,200 kilometers. Some materials coming from Oman. There is actual evidence, in fact, we have. So that shows that, right from the beginning, in fact, there was a lot of movement happening, a lot of contacts were happening. And that has also reflected in the, DNA research also. We do find maybe some small percent of maybe East Asian, maybe West Asian people's DNA, 2%, Iranian DNA, 2%. But when we have, DNA about 25% of one particular group, that means we are descendants of that particular group. And most of us have more than 25% Harappan genes. The rest, of course, are mixed. So we all, in fact, are the descendants of the Harappan people. So that is the outcome that we are getting. And that is clearly changing the perspective. Those who say that Aryans came from outside, it negates, in fact, because there is no break, in fact, at any stage, no genetic break at any stage, no discontinuity in the genetic history in South Asia for the last 10,000 years, 12,000 years. So people have come from outside. Of course, we don't deny that people have come from outside, but they were absorbed in the society, and that is the kind of evidence we are getting. So we Indians, in fact, we were so, right from the beginning, we have maintained that, that particular, cultural aspect, that we have welcomed people from outside, and they got mixed up with the Indian people. And that is the reality, Patni, which is reflected in the data that we have generated, scientific data that we have generated.
Wonderful, wonderful. Disha, continuing with our previous conversation, you talked about not just, these very well-defined spaces that have been dug out, but like in today's time, you have cities, you have suburbs, and you have hamlets. You said that was the case even back then. Yeah. Would you like to, talk about that?
I remember my first excavation, it was, of course, in Harappan site, a site called Binjor, which is very close to the present Pakistan and Rajasthan border on the dry bed of river Ghaggar. Very small site. Okay, and we studied in college and school about the Harappans, right? The urban settlers with cities and town plannings and rain and, all that which is, found at Mohenjo-daro and also big cities, of course. But you go with that notion as a young archaeologist to a site thinking that you're going to find that. But we found nothing of that sort. It was a very small site, about 120 meters by 120 meters. That's small, actually, in a larger Harappan context. And it has no fortification but enclosure. It had very small, rooms. But what it yielded, it's one of those evidence which you don't find rarely. It yielded in one space over 250 hearths and furnaces and kilns. At one level, we excavated over 300 of those hearths and kilns of different shapes, sizes, utility, which for crafts, yes, it was for metallurgy and also for lapidary, and different objects have been manufactured there, which showed, like it dawned to me very early on, my archaeological journey, that not all Harappan sites will have those, grid pattern, and the streets will cut at right angle. Not all cities, because I remember a very famous archaeologist, Professor R.S. Bisht, who is credited for excavating site Dholavira in Gujarat, which is now a World Heritage site. He visited the site, and I remember he was the one who taught us Mehergarh, and he was the one who taught us Harappan archaeology. And he came to the site and he asked, where is the street? I can't see any street pattern. And then I was listening as a young student to their conversations, and I asked this to our director about this particular question, and he said, whatever if there is nothing that you can find aside, that is also a research data. If you're not finding streets, if you're not finding these typical Harappan characteristics, that is also part of your data. Use that. And from there on, I started working on post-Harappan period, which is labeled as the painted grey ware culture, which, there is a grey pottery, fine crafted grey pottery, on which the particular strata, the archaeological culture is labeled. I started working on that, and I found that there is a lot of gap in that particular research, because for a long people have been focusing on different, research objectives. So that's when I realized that they're not all big cities. They are different, it's diverse. Even Harappan civilization is as diverse as, the present state that we see.
So Amit, sorry,
Sure, please.
just to add on to what you're saying, of course in my context where, even when we look at the archives, there is always a possibility that you'll come across something which you completely don't expect. So for instance, when I'm looking at the political discussions of the 1920s and 30s, and I'm looking at, what was going on in Kathiawar and Saurashtra and all of that, and even pan-India in the princely states, there is no mention of the term democracy or a democratic republic, Rather, there are extensive talks about a federation, right? Now, this is something that we don't study about in our history books, and the conventional historical narratives don't talk about the federation at all. Whereas all that I find in these journals and the writings of those times is about, let's become a federation, right? United, like we already anyway had United States of Kathiawar, right? And then like United States of India sort of a thing, So like Chinmay uses the word counterfactual, So for me that's very interesting to see that, it's a different possibilities of histories which did not materialize.
Exactly. So this ties into the thing we were discussing in the morning. What ifs of the
Absolutely. So that's what I was reminded of. What if? What if we eventually would have become a federation?
Interesting question.
The same.
Before you conclude, maybe can I say a few words?
Please.
Now, I began with the incidents. I told that, this is how the understanding among the common people about our heritage. So finally, this I would like to mention that history, archaeology is so important. I think everybody should know about our roots. And we can learn so much from our history and archaeology. Just 3 examples as you mentioned. Today we are talking about, this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. But you know that, Harappan, in the Harappan streets, they used to have the garbage pits where the dirt was disposed of. They were the first in the world, in fact, to develop the flush toilets. The concept of bathroom and toilets was, introduced by the Harappans. They were the first to introduce the scientific construction method which is being followed today. It is called English bond. When we construct a wall of a brick, one line is placed horizontal, next line is placed vertical. So that method was not known to the common English people till 14th century CE. So we always say that this is the Harappan bond. We should call this Harappan bond. And then I would also like to mention that what we learned from our from the Harappan culture particularly. 2 things, and I would like to mention that that knowledge has survived somewhere. I always give the example of Japan. Japan was destroyed in fact in Second World War. I've seen physically in fact Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the whole world believed that Japan will never rise again. But Japan became a world economic power within 15 years. They showcased that during the Tokyo Olympics. And the methodology that was adopted by the Japanese was exactly same as the Harappans. Harappans did not have the natural resources available in the area, but they had the technology with them. So by developing good contacts, they started getting raw materials from maybe surrounding area, from different regions. They produced goods on large scale, and then they started supplying the finished good to the same people from whom they were acquiring the raw materials. That is how they started developing, prosperity. And that prosperity was used for developing, the cultural elements, in the Harappan period. So that is the classical example. And Disha has mentioned about Dholavira. I think everybody should visit the site of Dholavira. Once I delivered a lecture, in Niti Ayog, and I told that, the modern town planners, they should learn how to build cities and towns. Dholavira was to be developed because that was in the desert part. And during the Harappan times also it was a desert. And Harappans were fully aware that, there is a dearth of water. So before establishing the city, they studied the geography and geology of the site. And then intentionally they started, they established the city between 2 small rivers. And that in the desert part, whenever there is occasional rainfall, these rivers get flash floods. And Harappans had created series of check dams on both the rivers. They diverted the entire water inside the settlement. Inside the settlement, they created underground water reservoirs, and they were connected by underground water channel system. They made sure that, in the desert part, they have created, running water within the settlement. And today, between Rapar, which is the nearest town, which is 103 kilometers, and Dholavira, there are hardly 4 or 5 villages. And people are not establishing villages because there is a dearth of water. But if this, Harappan methodology is used today, the best example of maybe water harvesting and water management, then the whole Kutch part will be desert, will be a green land. So this is what, I suggested to Niti Ayog.
Yeah.
And Niti Ayog is going to follow maybe.
We hear and read so much on...
I just have one point to add on to what Professor Shinde has just mentioned, and also what I was talking. Just because I say that there were no big cities, like not all Harappan settlements were big cities or urban centers, that does not mean that their architectural value was any less. they were building structures out of the same sort of mud bricks or baked bricks. The ratio would be same everywhere. So the style of even making a smaller structure would be as good as you would find in a big city. So that's the reason why we add them into the, the realm of Harappan civilization, because there are certain characteristics that are carried forward, even if it's a rural settlement and not an urban center.
Great. I think I would like to, throw the place open for questions. Anybody has any questions? Please. Mike, please.
Kind of you, thank you. Thank you for your time. While the attempt to keep this not sanitized but completely innocuous was made by all of you, invariably I hear from one side the argument that there is something that unites us, which can percolate to political mileage, and from another that some diversity and some sort of milieu of heterogeneous people existed. And even though I know three of you tried your best, we are living in our times. How are we going to use this?
I think, during the Harappan times, we do find, that maybe there are a lot of regional diversity also that time. And that is quite well reflected. There are different groups of people, but all of them have worked, together for the development of the culture. From culture to civilization, it happened because of the efforts. And this, the new research, that DNA research that we have published, I'm happy to mention that here, that this report was read by Mohan Bhagwat. And then now he's, proposing that, all of us are, one. In fact, Hindu, Muslim, we are one. We have the same DNA. So why not we work for the development of the nation? I think this message has to go clear. And this scientific data, people will accept the scientific data. Even I went to Pakistan and I spoke about this. They were so happy, in fact, to hear about this. So that, ultimately, this is how we can use this data for uniting the country, and also for the developmental purpose. The knowledge that we generate, that can be passed on to the people who are following the same, maybe traditional methods. And they can improve their, maybe the methodologies, they can improve the products, they can have better, maybe markets also. That is how this particular, we can play the role, in fact, in the society.
That's interesting, Professor Shinde. But, if we are talking about uniting India, what are the ways we do that? It's also interesting. I mean, do we really need DNA research to be reminded that we are one people?
But if we can, if we can give the scientific, evidence, hardcore evidence, it is not only DNA research, but the archaeological data also.
No, I think Amit
what
also
is reflecting, right? We have so much information in our textual sources also. So if we can tell that this is how we were, in fact, in the past, we have worked together in part for the development of the nation. Why not we work that? And this is the evidence for that. So we have that long tradition. So let's follow that tradition. And because we have this very strong tradition, this country, in spite of so many maybe attempts, this country has never disintegrated at any stage. We have continued that particular aspect, in fact.
Just to add on to it, I think the very fact that we also live in times of the presence of non-evidence-based material is so much, where it makes it even more imperative that we talk based on evidence, right? So the presence of unverified facts is big.
A lot.
So,
yeah.
which is where it's even more important that we...
People should believe the scientific data, not, those, who are, amateurs and they're trying to, mislead. I think we have to be, really, we have to make distinction between these two. And those who are scientists, who are creating data, I think that is more reliable and we should rely on that. That is very important.
Yeah, I wanted to add, like, it's a very interesting question, though. Of course, DNA data and I really want to thank the efforts made by Professor Shinde, because when last year we were excavating skeletons, we used their trial and error. We knew that whatever mistakes we made, the first attempt of getting a sequence, DNA sequencing, we tried not minimize that. And of course, DNA is one part, but let me tell you this, that archaeologically, what data that we find is all the material remained, right? But now look at the way our country is. So if you travel from one place to the other, there is a lot of diversity, not just in language. We already discussed about diversity in language, but also about our day-to-day behavior, our eating patterns. What is grown where is also as diverse as anything else. So archaeologically also we see that. The Harappans in Gujarat, they had a very different system of managing the kind of the climatic conditions that were here. Dholavira is a classical example. There is no water, so they would store the surplus rainwater. You will not find that Rakhigarhi, right? Rakhigarhi, they don't need tanks. Their subsistence pattern alters. So your ecology basically manages a lot of a behavior, and that learned behavior is what we find in archaeology, and that is what culture is. So that's why it's a lot of diversity. But then again, there are certain things that are common, a few parameters that are common across the realm.
I think one question that maybe will be in your mind, that I say that DNA of most of us are the same, then how the complex is different? Isn't it the people from southern part of India look different, from Maharashtra they look different, from northern part? I don't call South India and North India. I call southern part of India and northern part of India. The complexion differs because of geographical factor, climatic factor, food habits, and how much outside mixing has happened. For example, in southern part, we have more mixing with the Southeast Asian people and Southeast Asian people and African people. Because of that, the complexion looks different. Whereas the northern part has more maybe the Iranian, Central Asian mixing in the population. Because of that, people look different. Otherwise, DNA has nothing, the same DNA, but there is no difference in the DNA.
I think Professor Farooqi had a question.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I was really fascinated.
My name is Tana.
The Patni
Yes.
archive. And towards the end, you made this reference to, this very interesting reference to federation.
Yes.
Now, I think that's interesting because now there's a lot of interest which research, and there's a lot of sort of new work on the way in which the federal idea
Yes.
was so important in the 20s and 30s. There are quite a few sort of people who are talking about
Sure.
the federal idea, and that in Bhavnagar, that this Bhavnagar was also very much part of that
Yes.
thing, and it sort of faded away during the Second World War and never got revived. In that
No, it's a
period,
Chamber of
45.
Princes. Yes, the Chamber of Princes would discuss the federation.
So
And then it was
federal
on.
idea remained important, but 45 to 47, during the process of all those consultations, it completely got
Absolutely.
lost. Although Travancore and C.P. Ramaswamy
Sure.
Iyer, they did try to sort of
Yes.
they did advocate federation and they argued for it. So I thought, that was interesting. And if you could just sort of give us a little more detail on that,
About the federation?
about the way Bhavnagar might have been.
Yes, yes. So, what got me interested was the fact that when we study Indian history, we are made to believe that we always wanted to become a democratic republic, right? But there is no backstory about the negotiations that took place, about what could have been. And which is where I started looking at the journals from 20s and 30s, and I said, where is the democratic republic? And I saw there was all federation. So there was a Government of India Act passed in 1935, which extensively spoke about, a federal nature of India, and essentially there was a lot of debate which happened in the Chamber of Princes, which was set up largely for the princely states, for them to negotiate with the British India. and to kind of arrive at a structure, at a political structure. There are numerous documents which talk about this federal structure which could have been in place, but that also meant that we would be a dominion. That did not mean a complete breakaway from the colonial rule, which eventually picked up momentum in the 1940s. So it is something that never really happened, never could be fulfilled. But for about at least 2 decades, we are extensively talking about federation. So I'm still looking at those papers. I'm still looking at, these divans getting together, coming up with a proposal about the representation in the Legislative Assembly. How is the House going to look? In that sense, it is extremely interesting. So I'm yet to, I'm still going through those papers. I'm still to arrive at this larger argument that is going to be there. But yes, federation was spoken about in a very big way before we come to the 1940s, and then it kind of dissipates.
Thank you, Tana, for giving me
Thank
a
you.
chance to, take for my session tomorrow. Next question, please go ahead.
हिंदी में पूछ सकता हूँ?
हाँ, बिल्कुल.
मेरा कहना ये है कि हमारे पास इन हेरिटेज अपने परंपरागत ज्ञान है, सब आयुर्वेद है, सब ये संगीत का है, आर्कियोलॉजी का है, जो तो उसमें हड़प्पा से क्यों प्रेरणा लेना है? हमारा जो भी सिटी बनता है पुराना पौराणिक जो नगर बने हैं, नगर रचना, वो हमारे शास्त्र में से ही बने हैं, तो उसमें हड़प्पा से क्यों हम इंस्पायर हो गए? अपने पास तो सब है, ये जो स्टेप वेल बने हैं, कुएं हैं, तो वो सब है.
ये
और एक दूसरा उसका रिलेटेड है, मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है आपको, आर्कियोलॉजी ऑफ इंडिया को, कि जो भी गेस्ट ऑफ इंडिया आते हैं, गेस्ट ऑफ ऑनर जो गवर्नमेंट के, भारत सरकार के, उसको पहले आप ताजमहल क्यों लेके जाते हैं? पहले जैसलमेर क्यों नहीं दिखाते? क्योंकि जैसलमेर का जो रचना है ये प्योरली इंडियन आर्किटेक्चर है, उसमें कहीं भी मुगलों का कहीं भी मिक्सिंग नहीं है, आपको कोई मुगल आर्किटेक्ट नहीं मिलेगा. पूरे का पूरा जैसलमेर आपको पूरा भारतीय रचना है उसमें. तो उसमें क्यों आप नहीं लेके जाते? क्योंकि वो इम्प्रेशन क्या होगा कि भारत लोगों के पास ज्ञान है ही नहीं, मुगलों ने ही सब ये बनाया है.
ठीक है सर, वी गॉट योर क्वेश्चन.
इसमें मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगा कि जिसको हम इंडिक आर्किटेक्चर बोलते हैं, या जो इंडियन आर्किटेक्चर है, उसके मूल जो है शुरुआत है हड़प्पन से होती है, और उसके बाद उसका जिक्र बार बार में इसमें लिटरेचर में आता है, और उसको फॉलो करते हैं, अभी तक लोग फॉलो कर रहे हैं उसको. तो इसलिए जब रूट के बारे में जानकारी नहीं होगी तो शायद हमको मालूम नहीं पड़ेगा कि ये इन्फॉर्मेशन कहाँ से आया. तो इसलिए हम हड़प्पन के ऊपर इतना उसके ऊपर काम कर रहे हैं, ताकि वो मूल शोध हम उसका शोध करें. और जो आर्किटेक्चर हमको मिलते हैं, बहुत से आर्किटेक्चर इंडिजिनस आर्किटेक्चर है, कुछ इन्फ्लुएंस बाहर का इन्फ्लुएंस कभी कभी मिलता है, लेकिन बेसिक जो आर्किटेक्चर है वो इंडियन आर्किटेक्चर है थ्रू आउट. आप देखेंगे तो
I think आपको लगा कि हम हड़प्पा की बात कर रहे हैं, बट हम हड़प्पन सिविलाइजेशन की बात कर रहे हैं, जो कि पाकिस्तान में तो सिर्फ सिटी है वो हड़प्पा सेटलमेंट, बट सिविलाइजेशन जो है वो काफी बड़े एरिया में स्प्रेड है, जो जिसपे गुजरात, पार्ट्स ऑफ महाराष्ट्र भी आता है, जम्मू है, यूपी है, राजस्थान है, पंजाब है. तो इतना बड़े एरिया में सिविलाइजेशन है जिसको हम नाम हड़प्पन देते हैं. तो जब आप सोचे इतने बड़े ऑलरेडी इतने मेजर सेक्शन ऑफ इंडिया में सिविलाइजेशन है, तो ऑफ कोर्स उसका आर्किटेक्चरल अगर डेवलपमेंट इंडिया का हिस्ट्री का देखना है तो हमें हड़प्पन को ही देखना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि वो अर्लीस्ट है. आई मीन दैट इज व्हाट आई थिंक.
सर एक क्वेश्चन है. सबसे पहले तो बहुत कंट्रोवर्सी है कि वी हैव फाउंड अ सील एंड विच हैव एनिमल फिगर्स इन हड़प्पन सिविलाइजेशन. तो क्या हड़प्पा के लोग घोड़े से परिचित थे, हॉर्स? बिकॉज यूपीएससी एंड जीपीएससी नो वन हैज किसी के पास भी ये जवाब नहीं, कंट्रोवर्सी है, इसलिए मैं आपसे पूछना चाहता हूँ.
नहीं, मैं इसके बारे में थोड़ा मैं बताना चाहूँगा कि ये जो कंट्रोवर्सी तो है ही कि हॉर्स है या नहीं, लेकिन एक कच्छ में एक साइट है, तो ये सुरकोटड़ा करके साइट है, वहाँ भी एक्सकर्शन किया था आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया ने, और वहाँ कुछ एनिमल्स बोन का स्टडी किया गया. तो जो एनिमल्स बोन्स है जो दुनिया के जो टॉप जिसको हम आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट बोलते हैं उन्होंने उसका स्टडी किया है। तो उसमें दो ग्रुप है, एक तो हंगेरी का जो ग्रुप था उसमें एक प्रोफेसर बोकोनी करके थे, उन्होंने वो सबसे बड़े आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट मानते थे। तो उन्होंने आइडेंटिफाई किया कि जो बोन्स मिले हैं सुरकुंडा में वो प्रॉपर डोमेस्टिकेटेड हॉर्स के बोन्स है, उनका मानना था बिल्कुल। वो एक साइंटिफिक एविडेंस था। वही सेम सैंपल्स वे स्टडीड बाय अ ग्रुप फ्रॉम हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी, रिचर्ड मेडो थे उसके हेड। तो उन्होंने बोला नहीं नहीं ये डोमेस्टिकेटेड हॉर्स का नहीं, ये वाइल्ड डोंकी का सैंपल्स है। तो यहाँ थोड़ा ये साइंटिफिक डेटा में भी थोड़ा ये, और दूसरी बात है कि हमको कैटल के बोन मिलते हैं, शिप्स गोट के बोन मिलते हैं, लेकिन हॉर्स के बोन्स मिलते नहीं ज्यादा। तो था या नहीं अभी भी वो इश्यू हमको देखना है। लेकिन एक लोथल में जो जहां हम अभी नेशनल मैरीटाइम म्यूजियम कर रहे हैं वहां पे एक हॉर्स का एक टेराकोटा फिगर्स मिला है वहां पे, और एक मोहनजोदड़ो से भी है। तो इसका ये मतलब है कि शायद हॉर्स वाज नॉट कंप्लीटली अननोन टू द हरप्पन्स, and because it was maybe more utility animal, perhaps it was not used for food purpose but for maybe utility purpose, but still we need more data। अभी तक हमको हमारे पास डेटा आना चाहिए, और जब कंक्लूसिव एविडेंस होगा तभी हम बोल सकते कि हॉर्स था या नहीं वो उसके बारे में।
तो अभी ऐसा कह सकते कि नोन थे वो लोग हॉर्सेस से। और रंगपुर जो एक साइट है, रंगपुर सुरेंद्रनगर, यस, तो उसके बारे में अगर ब्रीफ में आप बता सकते हैं, बिकॉज वो साइट इतनी उजागर नहीं हुई है, तो वहां से कोई सिटी मिला था या ओनली पार्ट?
रंगपुर का एक तो मोटो ये है कि जब हमारा पार्टीशन हुआ, इंडिया और पाकिस्तान जब बन गया, तो जो नॉन हरप्पन साइट्स ऑफ पाकिस्तान में गए, सिर्फ दो साइट्स हमारे यहाँ बचे थे। एक तो रंगपुर साइट थी सौराष्ट्र में, और दूसरी थी कोटला नियंग खान पंजाब में। तो उसके बाद हम लोगों ने बड़े पैमाने पे एक्सप्लोरेशन करके हमने ढूंढ के निकाले। लेकिन ये साइट का इंपॉर्टेंस ये है, जैसे लोथल का भी उतना इंपॉर्टेंस है, कि हम पहले मानते थे कि हड़प्पा का उगम शायद सिंध में हुआ, और धीरे धीरे लोग यहाँ आ गए। लेकिन यहाँ भी अर्ली एविडेंस यहाँ अभी मिलने लगा है, रंगपुर में भी मिला था, लोथल में भी मिला है, और जो पादरी साइट हमने एक्सकर्ट किया था वहां भी मिलता है। तो इसका मतलब अर्ली हड़प्पन जो फेज है, अर्ली फेज जो हमको बोलते हैं, वो फेज बड़े पैमाने में फैला हुआ था, और ये डेवलपमेंट साइमल्टेनियस डेवलपमेंट हो रहा था अलग अलग जगह, इसका एविडेंस मिलता है। तो डेवलपमेंट पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से अगर उसको समझना है तो रंगपुर लोथल सरी की जगह बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है हमारे लिए। तो उसके ऊपर अनफॉर्चुनेटली ज्यादा काम नहीं हुआ, कभी 50s में काम हुआ था, लेकिन उस पर फिर से काम करके एक नया डेटा, नई जो रिसर्च प्रणाली है उसको यूज करके अगर हम उसको फिर से करेंगे तो काफी डेटा हमको मिल सकता है, और हो सकता है आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट ऑफ इंडिया उसको कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि वो नेशनली प्रोटेक्टेड मॉन्यूमेंट है अभी।
I think that's all for now. We'll start with the next session. Let's not delay it any further.
Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that very, very interesting session. One shawl for you. We will start this next session within 2 minutes.